What if I told you that one of the most powerful tools for improving your mental health is something your body already knows how to do? Not another app, not another self-help book, not another supplement, not another productivity hack, but something so simple, so natural that we often overlook it. Movement. Now, before you click away because you're thinking, great, another podcast telling me I need to exercise, stay with me, because that's not what this conversation is about. This isn't about running marathons. It isn't about going to the gym. It isn't about losing weight. It isn't about earning your dinner or burning your calories. This is about remembering something we've forgotten. That movement isn't just something we do. It's part of who we are. Somewhere along the way, movement became another task on our to-do list, another obligation, another way to measure ourselves. We started asking questions like, did I burn enough calories? Did I work out hard enough? Do I look different yet? And without even realizing it, we turn one of life's greatest gifts into another reason to feel like we weren't enough. But what if movement was never meant to be punishment? What if it was always meant to be medicine? Today, I want to invite you to look at movement through an entirely different lens, not as something your body has to earn, but as something your body has been asking for all along. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to the Soul Talk podcast. I'm Mary Beth Rim, and I am so grateful you've chosen to spend a little bit of your day with me. And if you're new here, welcome, where we have honest conversations about mental health, emotional wellness, relationships, and what it really means to live in a connected life. Because for 3 decades, I've worked in mental health, helping people navigate anxiety, trauma, grief, depression, life transitions, and the challenges that come with simply being human. Today, my work has grown beyond the therapy room into performance coaching, mindfulness, movement, and helping people reconnect with themselves in ways that create lasting change. Because here's what I've learned. Healing isn't just something we think about. Healing is something we experience. Sometimes it begins with a conversation. Sometimes with a deep breath. And sometimes it begins with taking a single step. And if these conversations encourage you, I really hope that you'll subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss future episodes. And if something resonates with you today, I'd love for you to leave a comment. I'd love to hear your story because I truly believe healing happens when we realize we're not alone. So today marks the beginning of a brand new series called Why We Were Made to Move. And before we go any further, I want to tell you what this series is and what it isn't. This is not a fitness series. It's not a training program. It's not about becoming a runner. It's not about six-pack abs, fitness trackers, or chasing perfection. It's about something much, much deeper. It's about reclaiming one of the most powerful ways we care for our minds, our bodies, and our spirits. You see, for years we've been told that movement is primarily about changing the way we look. Move more so you'll lose weight. Move more so you'll fit into your jeans. Move more so you'll finally become enough. But I don't think that's the real story. I think movement has always been about helping us feel alive. Long before there were gyms, before fitness influencers, before workout plans, human beings moved because movement was life. We walked, we climbed, we explored, we carried children, we gathered food, we danced, we celebrated, we grieved. Movement wasn't scheduled. It wasn't measured. It wasn't judged. It was simply woven into everyday life. And somewhere along the way, we forgot. So today, many of us spend our days sitting. We sit in our cars driving 2 hours to work and 2 hours back home. We sit at our desks all day long. We sit during meetings. We sit on the couch at night scrolling through our phones. Then we wonder why we feel restless, disconnected, anxious, overwhelmed. Our minds are moving at 100 miles an hour, while our bodies remain completely still. And here's what fascinates me, because our world has changed dramatically in the last, say, 100 years. But our bodies haven't. Our nervous systems still crave rhythm. Our brains still respond to walking. Our emotions still shift when we move. Our stress hormones still change when we use our bodies the way they were designed. See, we keep searching for complicated answers, when sometimes the answer begins with something beautifully simple. Not because movement solves every problem, but because movement changes us as we move through our problems. So I'd like to ask you a personal question. When was the last time you moved? Not because you had to, but because it felt good. Not because your watch reminded you. Not because you were trying to lose weight. Not because you felt guilty. But simply because being alive felt like enough of a reason. For many of us, it's been a very long time. We've learned to disconnect from our bodies, to criticize them, to ignore them, to push through them. Instead of listening to them, that's where this series begins. Not with fitness, but with relationship. Because I believe the relationship you have with movement often reflects the relationship you have with yourself. So I want to share something personal with you, because there was a time in my own life when I believed movement belonged to everyone else, and it did. As a young girl born with a congenital heart defect, I didn't grow up believing I was an athlete. Matter of fact, I was discouraged from being one. I grew up believing that my body was fragile. I was different. I was limited. But life has a remarkable way of rewriting the stories we tell ourselves. And the story I'm going to share with you next changed not only how I moved, but how I lived. You know, as I was thinking about this particular episode, I realized something. People often look at me today and see someone who runs and runs a lot. Someone who talks about movement, someone who encourages other people to get outside, to walk, to move their bodies, to experience life. And I always wonder if they assume I've always been this way. That may be that maybe I was one of those kids who loved sports, which I did. I did love sports, that I was naturally an athlete. I could have been if I was allowed to. And that movement just came easily to me. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, if you had met me as that little girl, I don't think anyone would have guessed this is where my life would eventually lead. Again, I was born with a congenital heart defect when I was 10 years old. I had open heart surgery. And I still remember pieces of that time, mainly the doctor appointments, the uncertainty, the fear that quietly settles into a family when your child is facing something so big. And even after that surgery, life suddenly didn't become normal. Growing up, I knew my body was different. There were things I wasn't supposed to do, activities I had to sit out, times when other kids were simply just playing outside, and I was being reminded to be careful. I don't think anyone intended to make me feel fragile. They were trying to protect me in their own way. But sometimes the messages we receive as children often become the stories we carry into adulthood. And the story that I carried was this: my body can't do what other people's body can. Maybe you've carried a story like that too. Maybe yours sounds different. Maybe you've been told you're too old, too overweight, too out of shape, too injured, too busy, too broken, too late. Whatever the words were, they slowly became part of your identity. And after a while, you stopped questioning them. You simply believed them. Now, looking back, I realized something that I couldn't have understood as a child. The hardest part wasn't my heart. The hardest part was the relationship that I developed with my body. Instead of seeing it as something that had carried me through incredible challenges, I quietly began seeing it as something that held me back. And I also held myself back. And I think so many people live there, not because they've had heart surgery, but because somewhere along the way, their body became something they judged instead of something they appreciated. Maybe you've looked in the mirror and only seen everything you wished were different. Maybe you've become frustrated because your body doesn't move the way it used to. Maybe you're living with chronic pain. Maybe you're recovering from an illness. Maybe you've convinced yourself that movement belongs to younger people or fitter people or people who have their lives together. I've heard every one of those stories. And if I'm being honest, I believed a few of them myself. But here's what I learned after years of working with people and years of learning about myself. Our bodies are not asking us to be perfect. They're asking us to pay attention. That realization changed everything for me because somewhere along the way, I stopped asking, why can't my body do? And I became curious enough to ask, what can it do today? So do you hear the difference? One question keeps us stuck. The other one opens the door to possibilities. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to become a runner. There wasn't some dramatic movie moment where everything suddenly changed. It was much quieter than that. It started with one walk, then another. Some days I felt really strong, and some days I didn't. Some days I wanted to keep going, And some days I wanted to just quit. But I kept showing up. Not because I was chasing a finish line, but because I was slowly rebuilding trust. Trust in my body. Trust that it was stronger than I believed. Trust that it wasn't working against me. It was working with me. And isn't that true of so much in life? Healing rarely happens all at once. Confidence doesn't arrive overnight. Neither does self-trust. Those things are built. One small promise at a time. One step. One breath. One choice. Looking back now, it's almost surreal to think about where those small choices eventually led. I've now completed, more than 100 half marathons. If you had told that 10-year-old little girl recovering from open heart surgery that one day she'd cross the finish line of more than 100 races, probably would have laughed. Or maybe she would have cried, I don't know, because she couldn't have imagined that. But here's the important part. The medals were never the miracle. The running wasn't even the miracle. The miracle was discovering that my body was never my enemy. It had been carrying me all along. It had survived. It had adapted. It had healed. It had been quietly asking me to trust it again. And I wonder how many of us spend years fighting the very body that's been doing everything it can to keep us alive. What if, instead of criticizing our bodies, we became curious about them? What if, instead of demanding perfection, we offered gratitude? What if movement became less about changing our bodies and more about building a relationship with them? Because that's what happened to me. Running didn't just strengthen my heart, it softened it. It taught me resilience, patience, humility, gratitude. It gave me space to think, space to pray, space to process grief, space to celebrate joy. It became one of the places where I felt most like myself. And that's when I realized movement had never really been about fitness. It had always been about coming home. Coming home to the body I'd spent years misunderstanding. Coming home to the life I'd been given. Coming home to myself. And I think that's where so many of us begin. Not with a training plan, not with a gym membership, but a willingness to believe that maybe, just maybe, our bodies have been waiting for us to come back to them. One of the things I've noticed over the years, both in my work as a therapist and now as a performance coach, is that we spend so much time trying to think our way into feeling better. We tell ourselves, I just need to think more positively. I need to stop worrying. I need to calm down. I need to let it go. But have you ever noticed that your body doesn't always get the memo? Your mind may understand that you're safe, but your shoulders are still really tight. Your jaw is still clenched. Your breathing is still shallow. Your stomach is still in knots. Your heart is racing. That's because our bodies and our minds are always talking to one another. And sometimes our bodies are speaking louder than our thoughts. I've spent nearly 3 decades in mental health. And if there's one thing I learned, it's this. We can't always think our way out of stress. Sometimes we have to move our way through it. Now, I want to be careful here. I'm not saying movement cures anxiety. I'm not saying a walk fixes depression. I'm certainly not saying movement replaces good mental health care when it's needed. What I am saying is this. Movement is one of the ways we help our nervous system remember that life is happening right here, right now. Think about what happens when you're overwhelmed. Most of us become smaller. Our shoulders roll forward, hold our breath. We stop making eye contact. We sit for hours. We withdraw. Our world gets very small. And our bodies instinctively protect us. The problem is, sometimes they stay in that protective posture long after the danger has passed. And that's exhausting. Our bodies were never designed to stay on high alert all day long, every single day. They were designed to move between challenge and recovery, effort and rest, activity and stillness. That's the rhythm of being human. Somewhere along the way, we lost that rhythm. We wake up, we rush, we sit, we stare at screens, we rush some more, then we collapse on the couch at night, completely exhausted, doom scrolling on our phone. Not because we moved too much, but because we moved too little. And there's a difference. Mental exhaustion isn't always the result of doing too much. Sometimes it's the result of carrying too much without giving our bodies a way to release it. Have you ever gone for a walk because your mind was racing and 20 minutes later realized you weren't carrying that same heaviness anymore? The problem didn't magically disappear, but somehow you felt different. Your breathing was different. You thought differently. You noticed things you hadn't seen before. Maybe you've experienced this while gardening or swimming or riding a bike or simply walking your dog. You didn't solve your entire life, but something shifted. I don't think that's an accident. I think it's how we're designed. Movement gives our emotions somewhere to go. Instead of keeping everything trapped inside, our bodies begin processing. Our breathing changes. Our muscles soften. Our thoughts become less tangled. Perspective returns. I've had some of my clearest moments while moving, not sitting behind my desk, not forcing an answer, but walking, running, being outside, listening to the rhythm of my footsteps. There's something about repetitive movement that creates space. Space to hear ourselves. Space to notice what we've been avoiding. And maybe that's one of the greatest gifts movement gives us. It quiets the noise just enough so we can hear what really matters. You know, I often tell people that our bodies are incredibly wise. They notice things long before our minds catch up. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt uncomfortable, even though nothing had happened yet? Your body noticed. Your intuition noticed. Have you ever felt your shoulders relax the moment you hug someone you love? Your body noticed. Have you ever stepped outside after a stressful day, taken one deep breath of fresh air, and felt something inside you soften? Your body noticed. Our bodies are paying attention all the time. The question is, are we paying attention to them? I think that's one of the saddest parts of modern life. We've become incredibly skilled at ignoring our bodies. We ignore our hunger. We ignore our fatigue. We ignore our stress. We ignore our need for rest. We ignore the tension we've been carrying for weeks, months, years. Until one day, our bodies begin speaking louder. Through exhaustion, through pain, through anxiety, through burnout. Not because they betrayed us, but because they've been trying to get our attention all along. And what if movement became one of the ways we started listening again? Not listening with judgment, not listening to criticize ourselves, but listening with curiosity. Maybe today your body needs a slow walk. Maybe it needs stretching. Maybe it needs dancing in your kitchen. Maybe it needs to sit on a park bench and simply breathe. Movement doesn't always have to be hard to be healing. Sometimes the gentlest movements are the ones that reconnect us the most. I think we believe this lie that if movement isn't intense, it doesn't count. But our bodies don't keep score the way we do. They respond to consistency, to rhythm, to kindness, to care. And I wonder, what would happen if we stopped asking, how many calories did I burn? And started asking, how do I feel? What if that became the measure? Not performance, but presence. Not perfection, connection. Because at the end of the day, I don't believe movement changes us because it burns calories. I believe movement changes us because it reminds us that we're alive. And sometimes that's exactly what our hearts have been longing to remember. And as we begin wrapping up today, I want to leave you with one final thought. I don't believe movement is about becoming someone else. I think it's about returning to who you've always been. When we're children, we don't move because someone tells us we should. We move because we're curious. We run because it's fun. We dance because we hear music. We climb because we wonder what's at the top. We splash through puddles. We skip. We twirl. We laugh. Movement is simply an expression of being alive. No one tells a 3-year-old to count their steps. No one asks a child how many calories they burned playing outside. Somewhere along the way, that joy gets replaced by expectations. Movement becomes another item on our to-do list, another obligation, another thing we feel guilty about when life gets busy. And I wonder, what would happen if we stopped trying to exercise and simply started living in our bodies again? Maybe that means taking the long way through the parking lot, walking your dog without checking your phone, stretching when you wake up instead of reaching for your email, putting on your favorite song and dancing while you make dinner, playing outside with your grandchildren or your children, working in your garden, walking along the beach, taking the stairs, standing up every hour simply because your body was never designed to stay in one position all day. Those moments may seem small, but life is built on small moments. We often think transformation happens in the big decisions. I don't believe that anymore. I think our lives are shaped by the ordinary choices we make over and over again. A 10-minute walk, 5 minutes of stretching, a deep breath before walking into work. Choosing to step outside instead of staying inside with our thoughts. Those little choices begin to change us. Not overnight, not dramatically, but faithfully. And isn't that how healing usually works? It's rarely one giant breakthrough. It's dozens, sometimes hundreds of quiet moments where we choose to care for ourselves a little differently than we did yesterday. I've experienced that in my own life. When I look back over more than the 100 half marathons, people often assume that's what I'm most proud of. Truthfully, I'm not. I'm grateful for every finish line, but that's not what changed me. What changed me were the mornings I didn't feel like getting up and running, but I laced my shoes anyways. The walks when I needed to clear my head. The miles where I prayed. The days I cried. The days I laughed out loud because I couldn't believe this body, the one I once thought was fragile, was carrying me farther than I ever imagined. Running it didn't just strengthen my heart. It taught me to trust it. And maybe that's why movement has become so meaningful to me. Because every time I move, I'm reminded that my body has never asked me to be perfect. It has only asked me to be present. I wonder if your body is asking you for the same thing today. Not perfection, not a better pace, not a different number on the scale, just your attention, your kindness, your willingness to listen. You know, after almost 30 years of working in mental health, I've learned something that continues to humble me. People don't usually need someone to tell them they're broken because they're not. Life has already done enough of that. What people are longing for is hope. Hope that healing is still possible. Hope that change doesn't require becoming someone completely different. Hope that it's not too late. And if that's where you find yourself today, wondering if you've waited too long, if your body has changed too much, if your health isn't what it used to be, or if you simply don't know where to begin, I want you to hear me. It's not too late. It is never too late to take one step, one walk, one stretch, one deep breath, one choice to believe that your body is worth caring for. You don't have to run a marathon. You don't have to run at all. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You simply have to begin where you are. Because movement isn't reserved for athletes. Movement belongs to all of us. It belongs to the young. It belongs to the old. It belongs to those who walk slowly. It belongs to those recovering from illness. It belongs to those living with chronic pain. It belongs to those who haven't moved in years. Because movement isn't about performance. It's about participating in the life you've been given. And maybe, just maybe, that's what we've forgotten. We've been so busy trying to improve our lives that we've forgotten how to experience it. Movement helps us experience life. The warmth of the sun on our face, the sound of birds in the morning, the rhythm of our breathing, the strength in our legs, the beating of our hearts, the miracle that we are here right now, alive, moving, breathing, living. And before we close today, I'd love to leave you with something I'm calling our movement initiative. As each week I'll offer one simple invitation, not a challenge, not a competition, just a gentle practice to help you reconnect with yourself. So here's your invitation for this week. Sometime in the next few days, set aside just 10 minutes. And if you don't have that, then that's fine. Just 5 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever it is. Again, start where you are. Leave your phone behind if you can and step outside. Or simply move through your home. Walk slowly. Notice your breathing. Notice your feet meeting the ground. Notice what your body has been trying to tell you. Don't judge it. Don't fix it. Just listen. And before you finish, ask yourself one simple question. How do I feel now compared to when I started? That's all. No pressure, no perfect pace, no expectations, just curiosity. Because I have a feeling that if you begin listening to your body will begin teaching you things your mind has forgotten. I want to thank you so much for spending this time with me today. And if this conversation encouraged you, I hope that you'll subscribe to my YouTube channel and become part of this community. Every week, we'll explore the connection between movement, mental health, relationships, resilience, and living a life that feels deeply authentic. I'd also like to hear from you in the comments. What does movement mean to you? Or maybe a better question is, what has movement helped you heal? And next week, we're going to explore something that affects every one of us, how modern life quietly disconnected us from movement, and what that disconnect is costing our minds, our bodies, and our relationships. Be gentle with yourself. Take one small step. And remember this, your body has never been asking you to earn your worth and has only been inviting you to come home. So take care of yourself. Until next time, I'm Mary Beth